Akila and I planned to keep the name of our son secret until the baby shower. Our friends pretty much were convinced it was the Bible name. But truth be told, my wife and I weren't too keen on naming our son after a Bible character. But what was important for us was to imitate the Bible practice of naming our son after a meaning that corresponded to the experience surrounding his birth and the hope of his future. It's probably a good idea to give a bit of a backstory first. Technically, this is child number 4 for us, but our first to potentially reach full term. After the 3 miscarriages, one of which was life-threatening, if not treated, along with bouts with depression and incredible pain, we decided to stop actively trying to get pregnant. Instead, we resolved to surrender our plans and desires to God for His will to be carried out. Well, one day my wife comes to me before I left for work and tells me she's pregnant, to my surprise. As I sat there not sure exactly how to process the news, she asked me what I was thinking. I told her I was a bit scared to get excited, given our history. To which she replied that she felt the same way. So we decided to keep the news to ourselves until we felt it was safe to let others know after the first trimester, perhaps. Well, much to our surprise, our boy made it to the first trimester. At this time, which was around 14 weeks, it was time to take a genetics test which would determine gender as well as any other important details about his health. And to our excitement, we found out we were having a baby boy. But as quickly as the excitement came, then came a shock that again left us almost discouraged. In the genetic testing, the doctor said that there was a 95% chance that he'd be born with Down syndrome. As my wife told me the news over the phone, I was at a complete loss for words. After discussing it with her for a bit, I told her I'd be home shortly and that we would talk about it more. On the way home, I was having some really dark thoughts as I asked God, why? Why us? I almost allowed myself to sink deeper into that dark place. But then I thought about my wife and what she was thinking and feeling. And I resolved to trust God and to be there to support and encourage her. We came to the conclusion that if God willed for this to be our experience and our son's, then there was something better in this path than if all was normal. And God did give us peace, and He assured us that He would be with us through this process. A couple of weeks after receiving the news, Akila told one of our friends as well. And immediately that friend, Rochelle, offered to set up a group to pray and fast weekly for our son, that God would be merciful and change the diagnosis if it was His will. At the time of this recording, we've been praying for approximately 18 weeks straight, with a little over 5 weeks left until our son is due. I've been growing more and more confident that God has answered that prayer, the prayer that we've been praying as a group, namely, that God would make our son whole, physically, mentally, and spiritually. And I'll tell you why I believe God has answered our prayers in just a moment. But first, his name. We've named him Jaden Azir Ballard. Jaden is comprised of 2 parts, J or Jah and Dan. J or Jah is an abbreviation of Jehovah, which means God. And Dan biblically means judge. In Genesis chapter 30, verse 6, it says, "And Rachel said, God hath judged me, and hath heard my voice, and hath given me a son. Therefore called she his name Dan." So full transparency, this actually wasn't what drew us to the name initially. As we were looking in a name book with meanings, Jaden was said to mean something different. In fact, when looking up the name through other sources, there were 3 main meanings that continued to pop up for his name. When I found this out, I almost abandoned choosing the name, thinking it was a bit too confusing. But as we thought on the 3 main meanings, we saw that there was a natural chemistry and progression as they were brought together that perfectly embodied the experience surrounding our son. The second meaning, and the meaning that initially drew us to the name, is God has heard. Now, when you think of a judge, what's a trait of character you would associate with a good one? That he hears you, right? And it's even intimated in Rachel's response to the birth of Dan. And Rachel said, God hath judged me, and hath also heard my voice. Because God is a good judge, and he will hear our cries, what is a natural response to being heard? Isn't it gratitude or thankfulness? The third meaning for Jana's name that we found was thankful. Jesus says, Father, I thank thee that thou hast heard me, and I knew that thou hearest me always. Azir, his middle name, is a variation of the name Azariah, which means helped by God. Azariah was one of Daniel's friends in Babylon, whose name also means God is my judge. If our son could have a legacy like Daniel and Azariah, we will be very satisfied, to say the least. Put together, his name means God is his judge, he is heard, and we are thankful because he was helped by God. The name reflects our confidence in believing that God has answered our prayers for our son according to his will, for him to be healthy, holy, and happy. You know, the night before our baby shower, my wife and I were having a conversation about the confidence in the Lord's will to heal our son. The next morning, I woke up around 2 a.m. with that thought on my heart. And I asked God why I should be confident. I could say that he gave us hope when a doctor looking at the ultrasound of our son didn't see any physical markers of Down syndrome. Or when we tested for the Down syndrome markers 3 times afterwards, and for some reason, every time the test was taken, it ended up being corrupted so as to keep the results of our son a mystery. But no, while I'm thankful for these glimmers of hope, my confidence came as I was meditating on a verse I had memorized that I quoted earlier that says, Father, I thank thee that thou hast heard me, and I knew that thou hearest me always. But because of the people which stand by, I said it, that they may believe. You know, if God reveals that it wasn't his will to heal our son, then Akila and I are at peace knowing God has something better for us in this path. But I do believe God has answered our prayers, because more than anything, it is an opportunity to glorify God and inspire confidence and fear in all who hear this testimony. And trust me, all will hear it over and over again. That perhaps at the repetition of the story, it will keep our son from wandering from God and seek to fulfill God's purpose for his life. But whatever the outcome, we know that God's work is perfect, for all his ways of judgment, a God of truth and without iniquity, just and right is he. Jaden Azir Ballard. For those who are paying attention, his initials are JAB, Jab. And truly the name is meant to be a blow to whatever intention Satan had to bring us down, regardless of the outcome. But what he meant for evil, God meant for good.